If you're having trouble mixing overheads, stick around because I'm going to show you how I mixed overheads in my track. All right, so a bit of a backstory here. I used to really suck at mixing overheads, like really, really bad. I didn't really know what to do because there was a lot of people saying stuff like, you know, only cut up to 250 hertz, or there was other people saying, you know, cut all the way up to 700 hertz. Ultimately, it comes down to it depends. And if you're working on a metal track like I usually do, you know, cutting up to 700 hertz is definitely not uncommon. If I'm working on more of a rock track or like something like that, kind of more jazzy or whatever, you know, it's going to be more lower end being able to come through. So 250 to 300 hertz is, you know, sometimes where I would cut a lot of that stuff out. But the problem that I found with doing that is a lot of the boxy mid-range that you get with stuff from that area of 250 to 500 is left in there when you can just completely eliminate it with the cut at 700 hertz. I mean, that's just something that I've noticed. You can EQ that out and stuff like that, but you know, since I mainly work with metal, more often than not, I'm going to be cutting at 700 hertz and just lopping all that out. So I'm still working with my band single here, and I'm just going to go ahead and show you guys how I process the overhead so you guys can have a better understanding of how to do so. So let's take a quick listen to how those overheads sound. So tons of boxy mids, you know, kind of washy a little bit, a lot of 700 hertz kind of stuff going on. There's not a lot of kick drum in there, which is a good thing, but you know, that snare is kind of cracking on me and the cymbals are a bit, you know, harsh and washy. So let's take a look at my digital EQ that I have here. I'm going to turn off each element of the digital EQ and then turn them on one by one so you guys can have an idea of what's happening here. Starting with the high pass filter, I'm filtering out everything below 220 hertz. So all of that low end that was unnecessary is completely being eliminated. And that is a good thing because, you know, your toms are not going to have that conflict. Your bass guitar or neither is your kick drum. Moving on to the second cut I made a cut around the same area, around 270 hertz, because there were some boxy frequencies that, as you can tell, were sounding boxy, sounding like a cardboard box. So let's go ahead and turn that on and off, and let's check that out. And it's really evident when the toms kick in. All right. Now, when you cut that kind of low mids out, you know, your ears are going to now have a perception of different things because that low end is not there to influence them. And that led me to make this additional cut here at 730 hertz. You know, the range between 500 to 1000 is very papery sounding. That's the only way I can describe it, like paper. You know, it kind of has that kind of quality to it. And so that being said, I found that I wanted to reduce those frequencies. So let's go ahead and play that, and then I'll pop that in so you guys can hear that. And that is pretty much all of those washy frequencies that are being eliminated there. And finally, there's a bit of a cut at 4K, at most 3 dB. The cymbals were starting to get a little bit harsh with all this extra cutting that I was doing. So I decided to reduce some of those frequencies so that they wouldn't be piercing in the mix. All right, and moving on to my limiter here. Now, with limiting, there's two schools of thoughts. Some people use it as an actual limiter to limit the cymbals. I fall in more of the latter, which is to use a limiter to control the peaks of the snare so that the peaks of the snare get reduced, leaving basically only the bodies of the cymbals. As you can see there, it's only affecting the snare drum, which is exactly what I'm looking for. Now I'm adding some compression right after that. That could be a personal preference for a lot of people. Compression is something that I never really used to do on overheads, but ultimately I found that I do enjoy some compression on overheads, more for an envelope type of shape and for some additional control on the snare. If you have a slow enough attack, it almost sounds like when he's hitting the cymbals, the attack of the cymbals is kind of being pushed forward, which is kind of cool in a metal track. And I have a very fast release so that the cymbals don't get their body or their tails, being brought up. I want them to kind of just have more of attack versus anything else. So let's go ahead and take a listen to this compression here. So it's acting on the snare and the toms and reducing them in volume, but adding that front end attack on the cymbals. Again, this is going to take some time for you guys to hear if you guys are just a beginner. It took me at least a very long time to understand what was happening when I would add compression. All right, moving on to the final plugin in my chain. Here is Soothe, the infamous plugin, and it is a very good plugin, but it can be very dangerous if you don't know how to use it properly. Now, the plugin is reducing some of the resonant frequencies that I'm finding is still present in the mix, and those resonant frequencies are a bit annoying. You can definitely hear them with all the processing that we have now. They sound like minor whistles, and this plugin is fantastic for eliminating those, giving me a much more cymbal smoothing effect. If you guys are having a bit of a hard time hearing those whistles being eliminated, let me flip the delta, which is the inverse of what the processor is doing, so you guys can hear those whistling frequencies. And that is pretty much it. That is my entire cymbal mixing chain. Let's go ahead and check out all of that in the mix. So as you can see, I just briefly turned off all the plugins there, and the cymbals started to sound really washy and annoying. And by reintroducing those plugins with all the moves that we created, we're getting a much more clearer picture of the whole kit as a whole with those cymbal mics being processed. So if you guys found this video helpful, give me a like, comment, and subscribe. I'd appreciate it. And if you'd like for me to mix your music, shoot me an email at divinemotherstudios@gmail.com or check out the link or the description below. Catch you guys in the next